Okay, so I am now going to work with an image trace. The first thing I'm going to show is actually doing an image that I've posterized, which may or may not work for everyone. It just kind of depends. And I have my image tracing window open in Illustrator. There might be a way to do this in Photoshop, but I'm not aware of it. You have to make sure you have this selected. And depending on what you want, I would not stick with black and white because it literally just gives you two colors to kind of work with. Grayscale kind of just breaks it down to grayscale. Color tends to give you a lot more data. Um, Always make sure you turn on ignore white when you first open this window. If you it will not have that selected, you must have that selected or it will double trace your lines and you will end up with a lot of extra work you have to do that you really don't want to. This is the tracing result, which in terms of you seeing what you're going to etch actually might be really helpful. Typically, I will turn on the outline so I can kind of see what's happening that way. Um, but it's kind of up to you. Before you actually do the trace, you have to turn off those outlines or it doesn't work properly. I'm not 100% sure why. You can change the number of colors that show. So say you wanted it to break down into like 6 colors. Obviously, the more colors you do, the more data you get. However, it becomes more complex of an image in order to actually deal with. You can change the number of paths that are on there. The lower the paths, the more geometric it becomes. Obviously, the more paths, the more it becomes very organic, but there is a point where it starts to break down the image itself. Typically, I will kind of leave that sort of as a middle ground. You can change the number of corners you have. It doesn't really affect things too much, so generally I leave that alone. However, noise makes a huge difference. So you turn the noise way down, notice how you get a lot more details showing up. Turn it all the way up. It takes a lot of things away and it starts to break down the image. So you need to kind of find a happy medium on the noise level that you have in order to get your image to look like you want it to. Now say I find a point where I'm really happy with what this looks like. I'm going to turn off the preview and I'm going to trace it. Now I am going to go up to Object and Expand. I'm going to leave both Object and Fill selected just because that seems to work best. And I am going to click OK and notice how it makes these tracing lines. Now I'm going to go ahead and go to Save As. I've already got a file started. You do have to make sure you save it as an Adobe Illustrator file. Don't save it as a PDF, an EPS, or these other formats. It will not work. So save it somewhere where it's going to work well. I'm also going to open this, which is the original file. So this one hasn't actually been posterized. So I'm going to show you what happens when we work with this particular image. I'm going to leave it as is. Okay, there's our black and white. Here is our tracing results in terms of grayscale. Obviously, you can move it around. It does give maybe a little more accurate detail, and it looks like, but it doesn't look like it changes it much, so it seems like posterizing the image in Photoshop doesn't necessarily help unless you want to very specifically control it, so I wouldn't worry about that. I'm going to go over to Rhino now, and I am going to go to File and Import, and I'm going to import that expanded Illustrator file that I just made, and click Open. You're going to get this screen that says Preserve Units or Fit Default Screen. I just usually use Preserve Units. If you get a screen saying there is no data, it probably means that you left the outline on when you did the trace, or you forgot to do the expansion. If you don't do, just have the sort of tracing outcomes on and then expand that, this process does not work and it will tell you there is no data. So I'm going to click OK, and here is my image file. So obviously it's pretty broken down, but the good thing about how we did this is all of these are completely enclosed, so you can just type in your hatch. If you have another layer, you can go in like this, and you can just go to the next one, do your hatch there. Oops, I didn't switch which layer I'm actually on right now. Do your hatch, and you can really just build up the image that way without necessarily having to edit a bunch of lines, and like these are always or almost always enclosed, so you don't have a lot of problems with that. So it's usually pretty effective, and it's a really good way to sort of break down a photograph if you want to specifically control the actual depth of the etch.